Hi, my name is Aliyah Rogoff, and this is my presentation on the Iraqi Jews. So first we have who were the Iraqi Jews. Iraqi Jews are also known as Mizrahi Jews, which is what most Middle Eastern Jews refer to themselves as. They form one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world. They were largely an urban community living in cities like Baghdad. They made significant and cultural intellectual contributions, including the contribution to the Babylonian Talmud, which the Talmud is a series of texts, kind of like the Torah. Its significance is just as important as the Torah in the Jewish community. And in the earliest 20th century, they enjoyed a relatively high degree of integration and social mobility within Iraqi society, holding positions in government, business, and education. And then their community declined in the mid-20th century because of violence events such as the Farhud, which I will get into. So here's kind of a timeline that I'll go over. I'll start with the Balfour Declaration in 1917, and then in 1921, the state of Iraq is officially formed, and then in 1941, the Farhud takes place in Iraq, and then 1948, Israel becomes a state, and then in 1967, the Six-Day War takes place. So what is the Balfour Declaration? The Balfour Declaration was a huge turning point in Zionism. Theodor Herzl, who is a very famous Zionist, had previously proposed this earlier to the Ottoman Sultan, and it failed. But then later, the Balfour Declaration came into place, and the Zionist reaction was obviously so happy. It was a symbol of recognition of the first goal of establishing a Jewish homeland. It was the first approval from a major power like Britain, and then was later backed by the League of Nations. It represented a fulfillment of a long-awaited goal, which was establishing Jewish presence in the Jewish homeland. The impact on early Jewish settlers. So around 40,000 Jews had already moved into the British mandated Palestine between the 1880s and 1917, but the declaration just confirmed the justice of their decision to return. Some global significance. So for Jews living as minorities, under hostile governments like the Iraqi government, this was such a historic shift, and it marked the first time a greater power formally supported the Jewish national aspirations. And the declaration's 102 words granted permission to build a national home for the Jewish people, as well as protecting civil and religious rights of the non-Jewish population. So now, circling back to Iraq, the state of Iraq was formed in 1920. In 1921, the Kingdom of Iraq was created under King Faisal I. In 1932, Iraq then gained independence and joined the League of Nations. In 1958, the monarchy was overthrown and Iraq became a republic. But in the 1920s, there were roughly 120,000 to 150,000 Jews there. But Jewish people have been there dating back to the Babylonian exile 2,500 years ago. So the Farhud and how the Jews left Iraq. So what was the Farhud exactly? Some key points were that it was a series of violent riots against the Iraqi Jews in June 1941. And in Arabic, Farhud actually means looting or robbery. Specifically refers to the killing, wounding, and robbing of Jews in Baghdad, and about 180 Jews were killed during this violence. From the book The New Babylonians, A History of Jews in Modern Iraq, we hear some accounts from Shaul. He describes feelings of terror and fear and helplessness, but he highlights some act of courage and humanity from his Muslim neighbors protecting Jewish neighbors, and there's an emphasis on both trauma and solidarity that emerged from the event. So the Farhud highlighted many important moments for Jewish Iraqi history, the first being acts of solidarity. So despite that there was so much violence, there was some moments of intercommunal unity. Muslim neighbors risked their lives to protect their Jewish friends, neighbors, and business partners. There was some religious and tribal values in protecting the peoples of the book, so Jews and Christians, and sometimes this overcame this nationalist hatred. The Zionist interpretation. Zionist historians viewed the Farhud as a turning point in Iraqi Jewish history. It was seen as proof that Iraq rejected Jewish integration and assimilation. The event strengthened Zionist activism, and some Zionists linked this narrative of the Farhud to the Holocaust, which I also kind of saw a parallel between the Farhud and Kristallnacht, which is the Night of Broken Glass, that happened shortly before the Holocaust. And documents of the Farhud are now preserved in Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Museum, which this is a picture of Yad Vashem. Right when you walk out, right when you finish the museum, you see this beautiful view of Israel's beautiful green trees, kind of showing that the Jewish people are still alive and well. So there's been suppression in the Iraqi national memory. Iraqi government and historians like to avoid discussing the Farhud. They find it embarrassing for nationalists because it exposed misconduct by the Iraqi army and their police. Iraqi leaders avoided acknowledging that urban poverty and social inequality fueled the riots, as this would highlight some policy failures. So when the Jews left Iraq in 1949, the early illegal immigration begins. With travel restrictions slightly eased, small groups of Jews started leaving Iraq secretly. Many traveled through Iran on their way to Israel. July to December 1949, there was the first wave through Iran where 1,243 Jews managed to leave illegally via Iran to reach Israel. And then in December 1949 to March 1950, there was a second wave of migration, and another 4,500 Jews departed Iraq, traveled through Iran to make it to Israel. So, 1948, Israel became a state, and after World War II, there was a lot more global support for a Jewish national homeland. The United Nations Partition Plan, Resolution 181 in 1947, proposed dividing the British-ruled Palestine into Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem as an international city. The Jewish leadership accepted, but Arab leaders rejected. So in May 1948, Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. This is a photo that I also took in Israel this past summer. So then that brings us to the Six-Day War in 1967. So there were rising tensions between Israel and its neighboring Arab states, but especially between Egypt, where their president ordered UN peacekeepers out of the Sinai Peninsula and closed the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping, which Israel viewed as a blockade. Arab nations increased military mobilization and alliances threatening Israel's national security. On June 5th, 1967, Israel launched preemptive airstrikes against the Egyptian airfields, destroying most of Egypt's air force within hours. Jordan and Syria joined the conflict, attacking from the West Bank, which is over here, and the Golan Heights, which is up here. But Israel quickly gained the upper hand through superior air power and strategy. Here I inserted a YouTube video that you can go watch that gives great accounts of actual Iraqi Jewish people and what life was like kind of after the war and how they were treated, and their personal accounts as Jews in Iraq.